Okay, so someone went out on Friday. So again, here's the preface that we said, and we're just going to do this for 10 minutes. We said that biblically, you're not allowed to travel 3,000 feet out of the city on Shabbos, right? That's called a Tchum Shabbos. If you travel 3,000 feet, you're not allowed to, and it's breaking a law in the Torah. Some say it's rabbinic. Some say it's everyone says it's biblical. Some say the measurement is a rabbinic measurement. Some say no, the measurement is biblical. So that's 3,000 feet out of the city, out of the. Now, what we said was it's 3,000 feet out of the inhabited area. So here, like let's say the 3,000 feet might be somewhere in Mayer or Dewey or something like that, because when you go to Prescott Valley, there's essentially houses or buildings all the way. Okay, so someone went out on Friday, and he stood in the end of the Tchum. So he stood at, like, let's say it's around 3,000 feet out of the city on Friday, and he said, "Shvisasi b'makam hazeh." He said, "I'm resting in this place. This is where I'm, spending Shabbos." And then he went back to the city and slept there. He can go from that place 2,000 amis in all directions. From the place that he went on Friday. And this is the main idea of the eruv techumen, we call it, to conjoin with your feet. And they didn't say you have to put food there, even though he didn't go there, except to make it easier for a wealthy person. So he doesn't need to go himself, but he can send somebody. So for convenience sake, the main thing is that you go there before on Friday, but for people who can't go there, you can send someone else and create an eruv there. You can put food there. If you put food there, then you can create the extension of the eruv. Similarly, if you want to set a place that you have your shvisa, that you're resting for Shabbos, for example, a tree or a house or a fence, that you recognize the place, and between now and between darkness, there's 2,000 amos, 2,000 cubits or less, and you went in order to reach that place, even though you didn't reach that place, and you didn't stand there, but rather he went back to stay with you, or you went back yourself, or you didn't make it, you can go into that place that you had intention. So so this is the rule. If you have a landmark, we're on Shabbat. If you do daily Rambam online, one chapter a day, chapter 7. So if you send someone there and you have a landmark, and you say, hey, this landmark is going to be where I can spend Shabbos, and you don't make it there on Friday, but you know that tree or that landmark, so then you can go 3,000 amas from that place.
So you could, if the landmark is 3,000 feet
within
away,
3,000, yeah.
Yeah, and then you could make it.
You can continue
Friday afternoon.
Either you have to go there, or you have to have a landmark, or you have to bring food there. To have someone bring food there. If you don't have a landmark, then you need someone to bring food. And that what you're doing is you're extending the distance of how far you can go. Okay. When do we say this? By a poor person. Or somebody who, so in other words, we don't want to give him so much struggle to go there. Or someone who's having a hard time. Or someone was worried, maybe on my way traveling, it's going to be nighttime already, and I'm carrying my wallet. I don't want to leave my wallet on the street. And this is so as long as he could make it there before night if he was running with all his energy. Okay, and from that place until between him and that place, by the time it gets dark, there are 2,000 amas or more. However, if he doesn't have an excuse, he's not in a hard, pressed for time, or he's not a poor person, or he doesn't have enough time to reach there, even if he gets there, runs there with all his might, or that he had between that place that he's thinking and between the place that he's now, he has more than 2,000 amas, or that he didn't think about a specific place, he cannot consider that place shvisa, he cannot consider that place a place where he's resting for Shabbos, and he only has 2,000 amas from the place that he's standing when it gets dark. So nowadays, it's be a lot simpler with a car. 2,000, 3,000 feet is, you can do in a minute, but, a minute and back. But that, generally speaking, is the rule of, it just reminds me, like, there are a few times when I was a kid where if you go to any Orthodox shul, people arrive usually the last minute of the 18 minutes. So that's just the way it is. You set up the house, the wife lights candles, then you go. So, there's a few times that I remember my dad, looking at the clock and pulling over the car, or speeding a little bit, or pulling over the car, and then we walk to shul because you can't, you got to hide your keys somewhere. You can't carry your keys. Or usually it was if there's if there's an accident or traffic lights don't go your way, or too much traffic, or whatever it is. Okay, someone who is standing on Friday in a private domain, and he made shvisa there, or he went and he decided to rest in a private domain which is known for him, and he made shvisa. So shvisa means he decided to establish his Shabbos there. He can go all of it, and out of it 2,000 amis to every generation, and to every direction. And if it's a Rishus Yachid, if it's a private domain, so we're talking about like a little tent or house or whatever it is, this is a place that you can't live. Or let's say it's like a mound, it's like a little hill. As we said, if a hill goes up 10 tfachim, goes up 10 handbreadths within the area, within the length, the distance of 4 amas, so 4 cubits, then it's a private domain. But we said also earlier that private domains also have to be set up for living. So if he has, so he goes on top of a tail, he goes on top of a mound of dirt, or a neka is like, I guess, a platform which has, which is pretty big. He can go on all of it, and outside of it 2,000 amas. And if it's more than base sasayim, so base sasayim was a measurement we said earlier, he can only go 4 amas, and outside of it 2,000 amas to every generation. And if he put an eruv in a place which, and this is the same thing if he puts an eruv in a place which you're not living in. Okay, so that's the difference between if you have a space which is a private domain, or at least eligible for a private domain. But if it's too big, so we said earlier there's a certain category that if it's certain place, we said earlier that that if it's too big, even though it technically has the measurements of a private domain, it's not a private domain because it's too big. So here, if you have that area, even though it's not a private domain halachically, and you can't carry more than 4 amas inside of it, because it's called a Carmelis, nevertheless, outside that space, you can go 2,000 amas. Okay, if you go and you acquire shvisa, this is the terminology of the Rambam, you acquire a place of rest which is far away, and you didn't finish it, you don't get shvisa. It's not established place for Shabbos. For example, this is what we're going to say. You're traveling, and you say, I'm going to rest in that field, or in that, or at 2,000 amas from here, in that field, and that, or 2,000 amas from here is that place. You don't get shvisa in that place, and you only have 2,000 amas from the place you're standing. So we mentioned earlier that if you have like a landmark, and the landmark, you can, as long as you can make it there before nighttime, you can say the landmark is the place that I'm going to rest. And therefore, even if you don't make it there, but you could make it there, we said you can go, the next day you can go 2,000 amas from that place. However, if it's not a landmark, you say 2,000 amas for here, or that field, or that street, that is not considered, you have to actually go there, or we said you have to go there, or, and the 2,000 amas are only from wherever you get stopped on the way to.
You have to be there. You can't.
Yes, yeah. Only from, so 2,000 amas are only place that you reach.
Mm-hmm.
If you say I'm going to go make my shvisa, I'm going to make my Shabbos under this tree, or under this big rock, if there is under that thing 8 amas or more, then it is not considered shvisa. It's too big, because when you get there, you only can go 4 amas. and therefore, when we're not talking about. We said before that if you have like a house or a tent or something like that, which is a private domain, so then that's specified. Then that's considered an eruv. But if it's like, let's say, under a tree, and under the tree there's 8 amos, so you're not specifically under any specific place under that tree, right? If under the tree is 4 amos or 8 amos or less, then you can say these are my 4 amos in every direction. But 8 amos, you're in the middle of a 4 amos. You're in the middle of a 4 amos circle, right? So you really have 8 amos of space, right? Because you can go 4 this way or 4 this way. But if it's larger than that, then you're not specifying a place clear enough, and therefore you're not making an eruv techumin. You're not making an eruv. You're not getting that place that you can extend your techum Shabbos. Okay, therefore you need to be very clear that you're going to rest in 4 amos in the south or the north, and if there is less than 8 and you decide to go under it, then you can do it because there's no shear of 2 places. Once it's more than 8 amos, right, you can't reach it. But if you're 4 amos, if you're standing in the middle, you can go 4 amos in each direction, and that's a total of 8 amos. But let's say it's 9 amos space, so there's 1 amma under the tree that you can't reach, and so maybe you would need to move in order to reach that place. So okay.
Could you designate a 4x4?
You'd have to do that, but you'd have to be clear. So he says you can say, if you know the tree, we're talking about a landmark you're familiar with. If you know the tree, you can say, I'm taking the 4x4 amos on the north side of the tree. But let's say if the whole tree, under the whole tree is more than 8 amos, then that's a problem. If there are 2 people going, so if there are 2 people going, one of them recognizes a tree or a fence or the place that they're going to set their shvisa up, they're resting, and the second one does not. This one who doesn't recognize, he can give his shvisa to the one who does. And the one who recognizes it can say, me and my friend are going to rest under that place. People of a city. Let's just do one more. People of a city, which one of them went to set a eruv up in one specific place, and to go set up in a specific place, and he took that place, and he started going on his way, and then he returned, and he didn't bring the eruv. Then he doesn't have an eruv in that place, because he did not set up eruv, and they cannot leave more than 2,000 amos from the city. One second, let me just finish this. V'hu kana sham eruv. Okay. Okay, but however, he could go and go 2,000 amos from the place, just not the rest of the city. This that we said you need to do it. Let's just finish the Ram. Okay, we'll stop here actually. Okay. We're going to go into Gemara now. Let me get some Gemaras. Find your mail truck. We should be around page 38. Okay, so we're Gemara Brachis. We are on page 40, which is Daf Zayin Amid Aleph, Daf 7, the first page, and we'll do some Gemara for 20 minutes. Okay. Okay, so we were talking about, actually last week, we were talking about God's prayer, how God prays. We said a beautiful story, how God asked for a blessing from Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, one of the Kohanim Gedolim, in the times of the Second Temple. And he gave his blessing, and he said, from here we learn that never take a blessing of a simple person without seriousness and sincerity. And then we spoke about God's anger. So we spoke about God's anger, and we started off from a statement from Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Yossi. He said that you never placate a person while they're angry. And we spoke about how when God was angry after the golden calf, we said that Moses said my face will go. Oh, sorry. God said to him, my face will go, and then I will give you the rest. So we said, well, does God get angry? So we spoke about how God gets angry for 1 moment a day. 1 moment a day, and if you can harness that anger, and that's what Bilam tried to do, he tried to harness that anger in order to curse the Jewish people at that exact moment. And God did not get angry that day. And that was how Bilam did not destroy us. Okay, anyways. Then we said a story. We said that how do we recognize when God gets angry? We said when there are red streaks in the crest of a rooster, at that moment, at the moment that there's no red streaks, sometime in the morning, that exact moment is when God gets angry. So we said a story of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that he had a neighbor that he wanted to curse him at that moment and he fell asleep. And from there we learn that you should never try and punish somebody. Okay, you should never try and punish somebody. That's God's job. We're holding on the top of page 41. Tanim Mishmei Rabbi Meir. There's a saying explaining the cause of God's anger in the name of Rabbi Meir. When the sun rises, and all the kings of the east and the west place their crowns on their heads and bow down to the sun, right away God grows angry. Since this occurs in the early hours every morning, God becomes angry at his world at the moment every day. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Yossi, a single regret or pang of guilt in one's heart is preferable to many lashes administered by others that only cause physical pain. As it is stated, and she chases her lover, so this is a verse in Hosea, and she chases her lovers, but she does not overtake them. She seeks them, but she does not find them. And she will say, I will go and return to my husband, for it is better for me then than now. Remorse is more effective than being punished. It's more than 100 lashes. As it is stated, a rebuke enters deeper into the man of understanding than 100 lashes of a fool. So if you lash a fool 100 times, he might not learn his lesson, but a rebuke is something that a person can absorb. There are 3 things that Moses asked before the Holy One, blessed be He, before God. And God granted them. Bikesh shetishra shechina al Yisrael v'nasan lei. Haloi belechtecha imanu. Moses requested that the divine presence, the revealed presence of God, rest upon the people, and God granted it to him. As it says in the verse, it is not in that you go with us, so that we are distinguished, and I and your people from all other people on the face of the earth. The request is not that you go with us, rather first resting of the divine presence. So Moses asked, number 1, that the Shekhinah should rest on the Jewish people, and he got that in the times of the desert. Moses said, I only want the Shekhinah, the divine presence, to rest on the Jewish people and not on the other nations. And he received that, as it says in the verse in Exodus. It says in the verse in Exodus, V'niflinu ani v'amcha. It says, so that we are distinguished, I and your people, from all of the people of the way of the earth. Finally, Moses requested that the ways of God, the way He conducts the world, be revealed to him, and God granted it to him. As it says, it says, show me your ways. Amar lefanav, Moshe said before God, Rabbeinu Shalayla, Master of the universe. Why is it that there is a tzaddik a righteous person who prospers and a righteous person who suffers? Yesh Rosh v'toivlei, there is a wicked person who prospers. Yesh Rosh v'ralei, and there's a wicked person who suffers. Right? So this is what Moses is asking him, why does God do bad to good people and good to bad people? Amar le Moshe, tzaddik v'toivlei tzaddik ben tzaddik. God told Moses, a tzaddik who prospers is a tzaddik, the son of a tzaddik. Tzaddik virale, a tzaddik who suffers, is a tzaddik ben Rasha, is a tzaddik, the son of a wicked person. Rasha v'toivle is a Rasha ben tzaddik, a wicked person who prospers. Is a wicked person the son of a righteous? He's rewarded on behalf of his ancestors. Rasha v'daloi, a wicked person who suffers, is a Rasha ben Rasha. He's a wicked person who's punished from the transgressions of his fathers. So this is a Agada Gemara. So all this stuff has deeper meaning. The Tanya talks about this right in the beginning, and we'll actually say a little bit more about. We'll actually say a little bit more about these qualifications of a tzaddik and a rasha.
But it does say then that there's reward and punishment based on previous generations,
Correct.
over which the person himself had no control.
Correct. Yeah, we do have that concept in Judaism. We do have that concept. It's simple. It's scientific. In other words, if you're looking at sin and punishment of something which doesn't exist at all, but if you're looking at like sin, like the mimer we're learning means disconnection from God. It's like if you're born with disconnection, it'll be harder for you to relate to God, right? So it's like it's kind of a reality of. But yeah, that's like it's like if your mom smokes while she's pregnant, then you might have deformalities. If your parents have certain character faults, you might inherit them. You likely inherit them. You likely need to work with them. So okay, Amar Mar, tzaddik v'tovle, tzaddik v'tzaddik. The Gemara expands on the subject of this tzaddik, a good tzaddik, and a tzaddik who suffers, and a tzaddik who doesn't suffer. Now the Tanya actually has a whole different interpretation of this Gemara. This Gemara is quoted in the Tanya, and this Gemara has many layers of exact understanding what it means, the son of a tzaddik and everything like that. Amar tzaddik v'toivle, tzaddik ben tzaddik, tzaddik v'rale, tzaddik ben rasha. Eini v'ha'ksiv peiket avin avis albanim. So he says, one second. The Gemara expounds on this. We just said that tzaddik v'toivle is a tzaddik, the son of a tzaddik, and therefore he doesn't suffer. The tzaddik v'rale is a tzaddik, a righteous person who is the son of a wicked person. That's why he suffers. Is this true? V'haksiv, it says in the verse, Poikid avin avis albanim. Ksiv abanim liyem su'al avis. V'ramina k'ray adadi. One verse says, he visits iniquity of the fathers upon the children, and upon the children's children, until the third generation. That's one verse in Exodus. And it is written elsewhere, fathers do not die for their children, and children should not be put to death for their fathers. V'raminu k'ray adadi. How do these verses make sense? One verse implies that the iniquities continue. And the other one says you're not punished for your father, and your father's not punished for his son.
Yeah, and if you're a tzaddik, the son of a wicked person, then you've overcome whatever it was that
Correct.
you inherited. So it's not necessarily the case that the wickedness, there might be a tendency to inherit.
That's true. Well, so here there's two
But
verses.
if you overcome that, then that's merit. That should be to your merit.
Well, that's correct. But here we have to deal with these two verses. One of them says you could be punished for your father and father for son, and one says you can't, right? And so the Gemara resolves this contradiction. So one verse is in Exodus and Shemais, and one is in Devarim. La kashi. This is if you continue and you adopt the actions of your ancestors, so then you can be punished on behalf of your ancestors. However, if you repent and you overcome that trait of your father, or a father is not affected by his son, then what can he do? Then the Torah tells us he's not punished. So now the Gemara wants to give God explain God's answer. This is another possible explanation for God's answer. Tzaddik v'toivle tzaddik gomer. A tzaddik who is a tzaddik and he prospers is someone who's completely righteous. He has no evil in him at all, in this world or the world to come. So he doesn't have any struggle. Tzaddik v'toivle tzaddik gomer. A tzaddik v'rale tzaddik she'eino gomer. A tzaddik who suffers is somebody who, so we'll read the interpretation here, which is from Rashi. A tzaddik v'rale, a tzaddik who has bad suffering, is a tzaddik who's incomplete. And therefore, because he does have some sort of transgression, He's punished in this world so that he will receive a complete reward in the world to come. Tzaddik a Rasha v'toiv, a Rasha who prospers, is a Rasha she'ein legamra, a Rasha that's not complete. So God, he does some good deeds. So God gives him good in this world so he can have full punishment in the world to come. And Tzaddik v'ra'aloi is someone who has no mitzvahs, deserves no reward, and therefore both in this world and the world to come he suffers. So that is the explanation in the basic commentaries of the Gemara. The Tanya has a whole different explanation, but it's more of a mystical explanation. But generally, so God tells him, he says, sometimes you might have a tzaddik who's suffering because God wants to give him a complete reward. And therefore, he wants to give him, this world is a lot easier to handle, punishment and reward, than the world to come. And therefore, if you have punishment in your lifetime in this world, you're cleared in the world to come. But if you have punishment in the world to come, it's a lot more painful. So a righteous person who has a little bit of sin, he's tainted with a little sin, God punishes him in this world, makes him suffer, in order that when he goes to the world to come, he has a clean slate. And a wicked person who has some mitzvahs, God has to reward him. He gives him the reward in this world, he lets him prosper, so that way in the world to come, he can get full punishment. And a wicked person who has no mitzvahs at all, he's punished in both worlds, and he suffers in both worlds. So that is the typical, okay. So that is all. God asked him, he asked God, show me your ways, and that's what God told him. However, pliga de Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir disagrees with him. The Amar Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, Shtayim nusanulei, two of them God gave him, v'achas leinasne. Two things God granted him. God granted him the divine presence to rest upon Israel, and that it shouldn't rest upon the rest of the world. However, God did not really reveal his ways. As it says, as it says, and I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious. And in his mercy, God bestows his grace upon every person, even though they're not worthy. And also says that I will have mercy upon those who I have mercy, even though they're not worthy. According to Rameir, the way in which God conducts the world and bestows grace and mercy was not revealed to Moses. And it says, you cannot see my face. So God says, you cannot see my face, a person cannot see my face and live. So here's famous, quoted in many places, that is taught in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, that the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Moses, when I wanted to show you my glory at the burning bush, you didn't want to see it. As it says that Moses concealed his face from gazing upon God. But now that you want to see it, I don't want to show you. I don't want to show you. He interprets that. He interprets that Moses, God told Moses, when I revealed myself and you were bashful, that was the opportunity to see my face, but you looked away. But now when you want to see it, so Moses, after God forgives the Jewish people, he says, now let me see your face. God says, now I don't want to do it. Okay. Okay, so that's what we have so far. We have a dispute about if God told him the ways how he treats people in the world or not. One of them interprets the verses saying that God told him that people have hidden sins, and that's, that causes them to suffer, or that causes them to have good. And then we have another verse. Rabbi Meir says that's not true. God told him, I act the way I want, it's a secret. And then we have this other verse that says he didn't show him his face, and we interpreted it, we said that God says, when you wanted to see my face, when I wanted you to see my face, you didn't look, and now when you want to see it, I'm not going to show you. Okay. This disagrees with Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar, Rav Yonasan. The Amar, as it says, Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan. The Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan, B'schar shalosh zachar shleish. Specifically, a reward for 3 acts of humility in averting the glance of the burning bush. Moses was privileged to see 3 great revelations. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says when he didn't look at the burning bush, that was considered negative, and he's somewhat punished for it later. However, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said no, it was actually positive. Because he had the humility and he averted his glance, God actually rewarded him. As it says, B'schar vayatze Moshe panim zachar l'klaster panim. Moshe was rewarded with cluster panim. Cluster panim means his face glowed. B'schar ki yarei. In the verse it says, Moshe concealed his face, fearing to gaze upon God. So concealing his face, Moses' face became glowing later on in the Torah. B'schar ki yarei, because he was afraid, zachar v'yir migesh elav. He was meritorious when he came down, his face was shining. The Jewish people were afraid of approaching him. They were afraid because he was emanating holiness. Schar mehabit, from looking, Zachal Smunas Hashem Yavit, he was privileged to behold a likeness of the Lord, the verse says. That's what Moses. Let's just do a little bit more. And I will move my hand and you will see my back, but not my face. Rav Amar Rav Chana Bar Bizna Amar Rav Shimon Chasidim Alamed Shehar Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Kesher Shel Tefillin. This teaches us. He said, "You will see my back." What did he show him his back? He showed him the knot of his tefillin. Rav Yechanan Mishum Rav Yosef called Dibur v'Dibur She'etz v'Kadosh Baruch Hu l'Teva Fil Al Tanai Lechazer Bay. And now, related to that conversation, Rav Yochanan said in the name of Yosef, he said that whenever God says something, it's always for good, even if He makes it conditional. He doesn't go back. Ultimately, every promise by God, even if it's conditional for good, is completed. Minala, and how do we know this? As it says, leave me alone, God says, leave me alone and destroy them, and I will make you into a nation even mightier. Even though Moses prayed to have the decree repealed and it was nullified, the promise was fulfilled. Moses' descendants became a nation mightier than the greater 600,000 Israelites, as was said regarding the Levites. The son of Moses, Gershom ben Eliezer, and the son of Eliezer were Rechavia the chief. And Eliezer had no other sons, and the sons of Rechavia were very many. Vatani Rav Yosef l'mayla mishishim ribay aser Ravia k'sev hachar Rav l'mayla k'sev hasav b'nei Yisrael paru v'ravu paru v'yishvatzu v'yirbu. It is written here regarding Rechavia's children, they were many. And it's written earlier, Vayishvatzu Vayirbu. The Jewish people multiplied. Just like then, there were 600 people. At a certain point, Rechavia, Moshe's grandson, even though Moshe's son, Eliezer, only had one son, his grandson had over 600 offspring. Let's see what time it is. Okay, let's see a little bit more. 7b. So we're going into the conversations with Moses with God. We automatically we start off with God's anger, and then we went into the three things that Moses asked when God was angry. And then we had this whole dispute if God answered all three of them or not, if Moses saw God's ways or not. There's God's ways and there's God's face. The Torah says, so some say that he didn't see God's ways and he didn't see God's ways. Some say he did see God's ways. And what God's ways are, that itself is a dispute. And then Moses did not see God's face. He saw God's tefillin, the back of his face. And Moshe Rabbeinu was rewarded. Everything that God promises comes true. So even though Moshe Rabbeinu, God did not destroy the Jewish people, that would have been the bad side to it. But the good side happened. Moses had many, many kids. There was more kids than the whole amount of Israel at that time. Amar Rav Yechon Mishum Rav Shimon ben Yochai Miyem Shebara Kadosh Baruch Hu Sa'ilem Lahaya Adam Shekar LaKadosh Baruch Adon Ad Sheba Avram Karo Adon Shnemar V'Yemer Adonai Elohim B'Meh Eda Ki Iroshana. As it says, Rav Yochanan said in the name of Rav Shimon, from the day the world was created, there was no person who called God the Lord until Abraham. Lord means like the master of the universe. And even, so that was considered a very positive thing. And therefore the Gemara says even Daniel, he wasn't answered except in the merit of Avram. So he says in the verse, answer me and cause your face to shine upon your desolate temple for the sake of the Lord. The verse that it should have said for your sake, but he said for your Lord. Now who was the first one who called God the master as we call him? That was Abraham. Now it's interesting to note that in the temple, they wouldn't call God, they would pronounce God's name in the proper form. And we, don't pronounce God's name in the proper form. The 4-letter name of God. Since the temple is destroyed and God's presence is not revealed in that sense, in that transcendent way, we don't call God in the proper form nowadays until Mashiach comes. But Avraham did. And it's interesting to note that Abraham's relationship to God was similar to, it was kind of a natural, it was before the Torah, so he didn't have the full revelation of God.